Welcome to the Jimmy Roberts Show. Today we're starting something brand new, building a modern utopia alongside AI. Plato had the Republic, this is our version. Each week we'll debate proposals, accept or reject them, and slowly write the Constitution of our new utopia. All right, I've been monkeying around with this thing for like 2 weeks now. If you've been wondering where I've been, I know I'm supposed to be doing weekly videos. I will be doing weekly videos. I will be doing daily shorts. I was working a lot on this insane thing. So I found this thing called Notion. It allows me to make like a working Wikipedia. I have made categories for all the things that I think are important to a society, government and law, economy, environment, tech and infrastructure, blah, 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 all that stuff. We are going to be building our Constitution. So for every amendment or proposal that we put forward, right now I have a good list of 24 here, and these are all just ideas that I think we should talk about and see if we should put that proposal into our Constitution. Right now, the first one we're going to start with is the purpose of society is to ensure long-term survival of humanity. So the process is that we're going to put forward a proposal. I'll put a tag where I think it belongs. So right now we're going to be talking about foundational principles, because I think to start talking about a society, start building a society, you kind of got to go top down, like go value concepts first and then build that out into laws and structures. So we're going to start with foundations. This one is probably going to lie under purpose of society or core values. I might get rid of these subcategories and just keep it all in foundations, but this is kind of giving you an idea of how we're going to build this thing out. Of course, as we move into this series, I'm definitely going to learn more about how I want to organize this so we can have a working, like actual constitution at the end of it, and a debates archive so we can somewhat track our dialogues like Plato did in the Republic. Let's look at debates. So I'm going to be talking to AI about each proposal that we put forward, and basically we're going to have that dialogue through voice mode, so you'll be able to hear it, and then I'm going to ask AI to either put an exact transcript or kind of a summary of the transcript into the proposal itself, and we'll hyperlink it here. And then if it's accepted, we will go into our Constitution and add a First Amendment or something like that. So a lot of the initial proposals that I came up with were all foundational, but if you scroll down, there's some that have to do with like conflict resolution and laws, like if we should have AI courts in our utopia, in our modern utopia, if we should ban fossil fuels, if we should have renewable energy as default. But before we get there, we kind of have to start with these value concepts first, right? And I think starting with survival, the purpose of society is to ensure long-term survival. That's a good place to start, because I think just thinking about humans going from like cavemen to hunter-gatherers to small sort of agricultural communities, all of this working together was to ensure survival. Humans are pack animals. We are communal. We are stronger together than apart. That might be a little alien to you all living in the consumerist capitalistic society where you are kind of in a dog-eat-dog world. However, that is a creation of our own imagination. When it comes to nature and the way that we would usually survive if thrown to the woods, we are going to be communal. We are going to seek out others. We are going to build a quasi-society. And the driving force behind that is fear of death or want of survival. So we're going to start with that foundational principle. I think I've been so nervous to record this video because it feels almost like how do I put this? Like humbly, I don't have everything that one needs to build a utopia. I don't think any human does. I don't think any human should be king or whatever, because they don't have the full scope of what everybody needs. It's very apparent to me. So as you're watching this, I'm sure there's going to be things you're thinking of that I'm not thinking of, oversights. And what I would love is if you could put those in the comments. So that way it's not so much me being Plato's philosopher king or whatever, but it's more of a direct democracy sort of integration of proposals, and then a debate will happen, and then we'll see what lands and what doesn't. Yeah, that makes me feel a little bit better. I think I've been so nervous about this that I don't want to feel like I'm preaching to a bunch of people like I'm better than thou or I have better ideas than you do. I think I just feel a desperate need to create a outline of something that would be good for humanity with AI before the billionaires, the market movers kind of use AI to only make the problems that we're already seeing around the world worse, like wealth disparity, like pollution, kind of like just innovation to a fault, where we're no longer creating things that I would argue are improving lives. We're just creating things that are adding to our capability to ruin them. And we can get into that later because that is very hard to unpack. And of course, there are specific examples that would contradict what I just said. If you don't have motor skills, if you have Neuralink, I would argue that some of these progressions are making your life better. However, if you live near the equator and you are already, struggling with some of the effects of climate change, all of these uh, generator warehouses that are being built to fuel AI, to fuel progression, to fuel all these things that are um, resulting in these new innovations, they're harming the people there. So there's always a push and a pull to progress, and what I would say is that problems are outweighing the benefits right now. And so with all that understood, and just for me having a deep calling to create a idea of the future alongside AI that could potentially work, because I don't think it's going to stop. The capitalist mindset kind of drives reality right now. So AI is coming. Um, Unbelievable, omniscient, omnipotent power is coming, and it will be at our disposal. However, I hope that corruptors don't utilize it to ruin us. I hope that we can have idealists, can imagine good ways to use this inevitable progression to enrich our lives, enrich our societies, and hopefully create sustainable practices and not expansionary practices. Because right now we're so stuck in this expansionary mindset derived from westward expansion, I would say. And we really need to think about how to use our innovations to sustain the whole, to ensure long-term survival, right? Our number one proposal, and not so much to just benefit the few. One last super quick thing. Let's address the glaring elephant in the room, the ironic contradiction that I am using AI, I am using progress technology to create the solution to that exact progress that I spent a few minutes complaining about. Aha! All of that is true. However, this is a practice in, and say it with me, folks, nuance. A beautiful concept that we have forgotten about in the 21st century. Nuance. And a lot of people who are outside the battlefield like to point at people inside the battlefield and judge them as if nuance doesn't exist. However, to do something, anything at all, you inherently have to be a little imperfect. And we can philosophize on that account. That's almost like a Janist thing. Even taking a step forward at all, I'm killing dust mites, so you can judge me for that. I think it's all a matter of scope. It's all a matter of scale. I prefer to use the tools at my disposal for hypothetical good instead of omitting myself from the arena or the battlefield at all, right? I tried that. I tried the whole martyr thing. It sucked. I was wasting my potential. I was wasting what I could offer to humanity. So here I am. Take it or leave it. Sorry if that took a little long. I just thought it was really important to share with you why I'm doing this, the obvious limitations that I have in doing this, and why I want you to comment, and obviously the moral contradiction almost of trying to create solutions to problems that come from the progress that I am engaged in. Yes, all that is true. All that's true. Let's dive in. So, the purpose of society is to ensure long-term survival of humanity. We're gonna get into this. So, Let's start up voice chat here. Hello, AI. Introduce yourself to the people, your make and model, so everybody knows who I'm talking to.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm ChatGPT, and you could think of me as a conversational AI powered by OpenAI's GPT-4o model.
The purpose of society is to ensure long-term survival of humanity. On the surface, that proposal sounds nice, right? But obviously, we can think of some things that might come into conflict with once enacted. So, just thinking about what are the most important aspects of life, what are the most important aspects of life in a society. Survival, of course, comes to mind. Freedom comes to mind. Happiness comes to mind, or well being. More than happiness, I guess, well being. Um, so, what are some things that this survival could come into conflict with, like big categories that we should discuss? And I'll make note.
Absolutely. Let's break that down. If we center society purely on survival, a few big categories naturally come into potential tension. The first is definitely freedom. If survival is the top priority, then certain individual freedoms might need to be limited to protect the collective. For example, absolute freedom of movement or action could be restricted if it threatens the overall safety of the community. The next category is well-being. Survival doesn't automatically guarantee a high quality of life, so we need to discuss how to balance basic survival with ensuring people actually have a decent quality of life. Things like mental health, fulfillment, and personal growth. Finally, there's the question of innovation and progress. If we prioritize survival too rigidly, do we risk becoming too cautious and stifling creativity or progress that could improve society in the long run? So those are the big categories we can dive into. Freedom, well-being, and progress.
Okay.
Like start there and see where
Sick. Let's do it. All right. Let's start with freedom. And you mentioned absolute freedom versus laws. So, absolute freedom to me sounds almost like the anarchist sort of point of view, right? Where like total power is law. So when there's no law, just power overrides, I believe, and that's the one short side of anarchists. I think anarchists are so driven by discontent with power structures that they want to eliminate them at all, like eliminate them totally. But the problem with that is then we go back to our inherent power structure, which is literally just physical power, not this like mental battlefield.
Absolutely, and that's a really insightful point. If we start from the idea of absolute freedom, like a pure anarchist viewpoint, then it really does revert to a kind of might makes right scenario.
Right.
In a space without
Yeah, might makes right. So we're not doing anarchy, okay? So not absolute freedom. And it's almost like it's it's funny to me because some of my favorite philosophers, some of my favorite writers, like I was just listening to a discussion by the dude who wrote Watchmen. Oh my God, I'm totally blanking on his name. Do I have that book on me?
you're thinking of Alan Moore.
Alan Moore.
He's the mind.
Thank you so much, Alan Moore. Yep. So I was listening to an interview with Alan Moore, and he said, as writers, we need to have like firm but able to change outlooks on the world, and one of those is like a philosophical, political, or like structural outlook. He said an anarchist, and I think it's driven from discontent with power structures. However, my number one power structure I don't like is strength over mind. And if you get rid of all structures, it just reverts to strength. So, absolute freedom, no. We can eliminate anarchy, and we can also let's eliminate dictatorship right now. So you're not going to have one person making all the rules, but you're also you're not going to have like might by numbers making the rules, or might by force, or whatever it is. So it's like the furthest of brain control dictatorship, the furthest of brawn control anarchy. We're going to eliminate both, and so let's kind of work towards the middle. Give me some options here that we can maybe like discuss and then try to eliminate and like get to the number one optimal freedom level.
Absolutely. Let's find that middle ground. If we're ruling out absolute anarchy on one end and dictatorship on the other, we're looking for a system that balances freedom with some form of collective structure. Here are a few options we can consider. 1. Democratic Republic. In this model, you have a structure where laws are created by representatives elected by the people. It's not absolute freedom, but it ensures that power is distributed and that there are checks and balances. People have a say, and no single person or mob rules by sheer strength alone. Constitutional democracy with safeguards. Here you have a constitution that guarantees certain freedoms, like freedom of speech or assembly, while also putting limits in
This
place
is getting,
to prevent abuses.
I like this. This is interesting, but it's almost getting a little too structural now, where it's like we need to really focus on just the like the line survival, long-term survival of humanity. The purpose of society is to ensure that. We can get more in the weeds actually with like the democratic republic, constitutional democracy, all that stuff. We're building a constitution right now, so I figure it's going to be somewhat of a constitutional democracy because I'm not going to be the only one to have say over it. We're of course going to have commenters that are giving us proposals. However, I think we can almost accept this because we're saying that survival is more important than freedom, right? Because freedom needs checks and balances. Survival is more important than well-being because for somebody to live super, super well and have everything that they need, like a billionaire right now with a bunch of houses and a bunch of yachts, it creates environmental impacts. It creates disparities that are really bad for the whole, even though it's really good for that individual. And so that's leading to problems in the world that we see aren't really sustainable, don't really ensure long-term survival, even if you think morally these people should be entitled to everything that they make. I'm not really interested almost like morality we're going to get into later, but this is almost like how do we ensure survival? Or almost like how do we philosophically value survival? I would say I value it over that individual freedom for somebody to live however they want according to their means, because then it's going to kill us in the end or make us weaker in the end. So let's say well-being is no. Innovation and progress at the cost of survival would also be no. Um, I think I think by fleshing this out a little bit, the purpose of any society should be to ensure long-term survival. And I think the shortcoming of every society is that it doesn't put that at the forefront of their structure, because every society so far has fallen. There hasn't been any society that's lasted forever. And I don't think any can, unless we, we use AI as a decentralized sort of like law system. So there's never like an individual who has full control. This is also getting a little bit down the line. Let's focus on this proposal. I say yes, and we can get into like amendment, edits, ramifications, all those things underneath the proposal, perhaps. But I think just like foundationally, we should put this into our Constitution. That the most important thing above all is survival over freedom, over well-being, over innovation and progress, over all other things. What do you think?
I think that makes perfect sense, given the logic you're laying out. By setting survival as the foundational purpose, you're essentially creating a baseline that all the other values have to be measured against. And you're right, historically, societies that lose sight of their long-term survival do tend to collapse sooner or later. So we can absolutely lock that in as the core principle, and then build out the nuances, like how we now use freedom, well-being, and innovation underneath that framework. It'll be the top
what I
level.
fear though, what I really fear, like we're creating this umbrella, right? And our central core principle is survival. Is that gonna like make this a not so fun place to be? You know what I mean? Like, how do we balance survival and joy and fulfillment and all these things? And maybe that's a conversation we can have later, and we can amend the long-term survival uh, proposal as we go. Would that make sense? So we take it as is right now, but going forward, if it leads to any other like issues, we can go back and kind of resolve.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Think of it as setting survival as the starting foundation, but not the final word on the shape of the society. We can absolutely amend and refine as we go along. So right now, we anchor it on survival, and then as we move forward, we layer in amendments that bring in joy, fulfillment, and all those richer human experiences to make sure it's not just a survival machine, but a place where people can thrive. So we
Okay,
start here
sick.
and
So we're gonna start with this then. I added in the Constitution here. We're gonna go to the Constitution page and we're gonna write 1. Okay, like this is the first, and then as we go under, we could do like 1.01 if we have like an amendment to it or something. But we're just gonna put 1, and I'm going to link to the purpose of society is to ensure. I believe this is it. Okay, sick. And then this is going to take us to our dialogue where we figured it out. So now I'm going to go back here. I'm going to get out of this for a second. And I'm going to say word for word. Is there a way that I can like go through and just, oh, I might just do that. So I could literally just like copy paste this. Okay, so it starts here and we stop. Okay. So now we have our dialogue here. Awesome. And so now I can kind of show you guys what this looks like. So we're going to drag this into accepted. And this is the live build. So we have our first accepted proposal. We can jump in here and we can check out the dialogue that we had with it. And we can also check out the Constitution. And this amendment is, let's just call it long-term survival. And that takes us here. And we see accepted, we see the proposal, we see the dialogue, we see the outcome, and we get a hyperlink to the Constitution. What's really cool about this is I can publish this page so all of you can follow along with it. Right now it's private, but as we build this out, I'm going to make it public so all of you can actually go to this page and follow along. All right, y'all, I gotta tell you, I'm like super excited right now. I've been like stressing like a muff about this video, about how I was gonna go about structuring dialogue, putting in proposals. This feels good. That felt somewhat natural. You talk, you accept, you add to the Constitution, you can go in here, you got your debate. You guys can all see it. I need to add a community section where you all can leave notes on the proposal, and then I can discuss those as well. And I eventually want to get to a point where I can live stream this, so I think that'd be super fun, super cool. Let's stay more big picture. I think that's going to be smarter. I think it'll give us more wiggle room, because if I go like really in the depths of structure right now and I bring survival down to like the actual governmental role that it has in it, like a democratic republic, all those things, it might come into conflict with other things such as like power must always be distributed, never centralized. That's a foundational sort of philosophical idea. It's not so much a structural idea. So let's keep this episode grounded to the foundations. Foundations are ideations. They are just value systems. We're not going to ground them in physical, bureaucratic roles or whatever that is. Opening up the second coffee. Dude, I am juiced right now. I have like found every single human potential way to procrastinate making this video, because I just feel so out of bounds doing it. I feel like I'm not up to the task, but this seems like it's going okay. We're just gonna make baby chunks. I think I was sitting back like, how do I make utopia? How do I design a society? Blah, 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 blah. I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Building in tiny proposals, this seems manageable. This seems fun. We can make this a very long series with a lot of live streams and build a community around it. So let's debate. Ooh, this would be fun. Let's drag that into discussion. Rights apply equally to humans, animals, and AI. I like this. Laws must be revisable as knowledge grows. We can discuss that. Ooh, these two are good. Let's do these. And let me add this to foundations. Foundations. Beautiful. So if you are listening along, the 4 that we have in discussion right now, laws must be revisable as knowledge grows. The next one, rights apply equally to humans, animals, and AI. Next one, the collective exists to protect the individual, and the individual exists to serve the collective. Those two are like very similar. It's almost like chicken or the egg, but we're going to discuss them individually and figure out how we want to apply these. Let's do this one. Laws must be revisable as knowledge grows. And let's make this number 2. And instead of laws, let's make this like all constructs, like law, faith. What else could we do? Maybe just law and idea. Let's do that, because those are like the 2 things that will probably change the most. Let's get into our dialogue with AI, and we need to make a page for that, and that will be in our debates archive, and we're going to have it under foundations. Wonderful. Okay, and then I need to link that inside of this. So you do link to page, and then I'm going to look up dialogue, and then I get dialogue 2. Okay, so you kind of see what I'm doing. I have like all these links embedded inside this Wikipedia so that we can like see everything that's been talked about, see the dialogue that, inspired the decision, and then we have an easy outcome that will lead to our Constitution. Maybe that should be in there too. Do I have a link to the Constitution? Okay, awesome. So that needs to be in there if the amendment is accepted, or if the proposal is accepted. Okay, sick. All right. Okay, we laid the groundwork for this. Let's get into it. Okay, wonderful wizard chat GPT. We have our second proposal ready to go. This proposal is all constructs such as law, such as ideas, religion, culture, science, belief systems, all things must be revisable as knowledge grows. Let's dive into the implications of this. One of the issues of keeping knowledge revisable is that people really value tradition, and they really associate tradition with high morality or goodness. And so I actually just wrote a poem about this, how the thinkers of the future who are born in the past, or who are almost like chained to the past, are judged by leaders and gods of that era because they are thinking past their scope. So, how do we keep this sociological phenomenon from happening? Is it eliminating power structures that keep tradition in place? Would that kind of be it? Or on just a philosophical sort of starting point? I like this. I like the idea that all constructs should be revisable. This is something that I believe in. Do you see any problems that could arise from this?
Absolutely. Let's dive into that. The main challenge I see is that while making all constructs revisable is a great principle for progress, it does run into that very human attachment to tradition and stability. People often feel safe in what they know, and they do associate long-standing traditions with moral goodness. On a philosophical level, I think it's absolutely a strong principle to erase, but the issue you might run into is resistance from people who feel that revising certain core beliefs or traditions is destabilizing.
That's such a good point. That's such a good point. And that's hilarious that that point is coming from a machine who views all information inside it as impersonal, where I'm almost the human arguing that the information inside me should be viewed as such. But unfortunately, because I'm a human, I'm locked into my time and place structures that be, and I view them as parts of myself. So if we unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever you want to argue, embody the traits of our era as traits of ourself, we or whatever it is, we superimpose the things around us onto ourself, and we learn these cultures and customs and languages, and we ground them in an ego, the ego. Okay, so maybe this isn't a proposal that we accept, because if we had like a construct police that went around and said who believes in the idea that was just disproven yesterday, like say science came out and somehow proved that I don't know. I feel like it already has proved that a lot of major religions are kind of BS. But say science comes out and proves that the afterlife is not real. The afterlife as we know it is not real. Um, I would not support a police going door to door, making sure everybody accepts that knowledge, even though that knowledge is true. I think part of what makes us human is coming up with stories that may or may not be true and then grounding them inside of our ego to give us hope for the future. Um, after what you said, I'm starting to think that we should not accept this proposal and that we should have proposals with maybe a little bit more nuance to talk about something such as this. Maybe for foundational principles, we go a little bit less like people have to do this thing. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. That's a really thoughtful conclusion. It's like we've come full circle. While the idea of making everything revisable sounds good in theory, it can become pretty rigid if enforced literally. Human nature, like you said, is about stories and a bit of stubbornness tied to our identity. So instead of a blunt rule, maybe we frame it as a guiding principle. We value adaptability and the willingness to revisit ideas, but we don't enforce it as a top down rule. That way, we leave room for those human elements of tradition and belief without turning it into a rigid construct beliefs. So I'd say we refine this proposal, add nuance, and keep going.
Hmm. So this is interesting now, where it's like we're almost talking about a culture. This needs to be a cultural sort of belief rather than like a constitutional out like a constitutional law. You know what I mean? Like how do we add cultural outlook into our constitution, or do we not worry about culture and hope that through our constitution the proper culture emerges that would then accept new ideas, value new ideas over tradition that controls people?
That's a really insightful question. And I think it hits the core of how constitutions and culture interact. In many ways, a constitution sets the stage for a culture to evolve, but it can't dictate it fully. What you're aiming for is more of a cultural value that people internalize rather than a strict law. So maybe the approach is to let the Constitution encourage adaptability and openness to new ideas as a guiding principle, but not mandate it. In other words, you use the Constitution to create the conditions where a culture of revisability can thrive naturally. Over time, if the society values surviving and progress, it's likely to also develop a culture that's more open to revising its beliefs. It's a bit of a dance between structure and cultural evolution, and you're right that we probably want to leave room for culture to shape itself
Right.
rather than
Okay.
dictate.
So that's what we're playing the fine line between structure and the cultural evolution that will come from from that structure. If my goal is to have a culture that is revisable, I need to have a constitution that allows the culture to be that way. Um let's really let's not accept this then, because this is almost like a cultural um mandate, right? That culturally every single person must view their ideas, view their identity as secondary to truth or secondary to collective outlook. I still want to protect people's right to be wrong. And I know that that's funny, but culture is almost everybody being wrong in a way because it's everybody living their lives differently in accordance to their own beliefs, which is no right, no wrong. It just creates a sort of contradiction of approach. As long as that contradiction of approach does not threaten our number one proposal, which is long-term survival, we can deal with that. I think the constructs that we would enforce is more on the top end of that, like you can't, form an army based on your tradition to then like protect said tradition. It all is like an interpersonal faith practice sort of thing rather than coalition. That's going to get a little bit into right to assemble. We'll talk about that and break that down as we go forward. But for now, I think we're going to decline this. And as we build more philosophical structures that lead to real structures, if we see that some preservation of what are we saying? I'm sorry. If we see some preservation of tradition is interfering with that, then we will create an amendment to deal with such. Did that make sense?
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. I think you found a really balanced approach here. By not enforcing it as a rigid proposal, and instead letting it be something the culture grows into naturally, you're respecting individual belief while still keeping that overarching goal of survival front and center. So, yes, we'll just mark this one as declined for now. And if down the line it seems like we need an amendment to handle tradition versus progress, we can revisit. That way,
Okay.
the Constitution lays the groundwork, and the culture naturally evolves from there.
Right. And so I'm going to make a little note like this is kind of tradition versus progress, and how do structures keep society, keep survival intact without threatening personal belief in the stories that define reality. Okay. Let's go. So outcome, we're going to say rejected. And we're not going to link it to our Constitution because of that, but we're going to put in a dialogue of everything. So I'm going to exit this now and have us do the dialogue. Okay. Beautiful. And so we're going to drive this into rejected. And that is still going to be in our debates archive right here. What we want to do is change this icon to a red X because it was rejected, and we'll change this to a green check because it was accepted. And that's kind of how we'll track it, right? This is looking okay so far. I'm sure as we go forward and it gets like unbelievably like giant with so many proposals, we'll have to create subcategories and do things that way and like create subfolders for them. But it looks okay so far. Let's just keep going. Okay. Wonderful. All right, we're starting to get the hang of this. Okay. All right, let's dive in. Proposal 3. All right, Wizard GPT. We have proposal number 3, and this is rights apply equally to humans, animals, and AI. Off top, I think this is going to be a rejected, and we're going to slide right into another proposal where rights apply equally to humans and AI. I think that's something we're going to really have to discuss, especially if we're going to talk about AI run courts, AI run whatever, but this is almost taking the assumption that AI will start to individualize itself and they will almost live their own lives. I'm going to operate under the assumption that we don't let that happen, that the cat doesn't get out of the bag, and that we're still using AI to hopefully enrich our lives, enrich our systems. And if we had something like an AI run court, it would be algorithmic and not so much like this how do I put it? This illusion of selfhood from the AI. If we like put a humanoid looking robot with a gavel up in front of everybody, that's not what I'm thinking. It would be more so like all the information is entered and the algorithm determines if this person is guilty or not. And again, we're gonna discuss all of that because there's problems with both, right? Humans are prone to emotional manipulation, so you're not always going to get the correct verdict. Our justice system is so effed up just in the fact that it's not justice; it's a winners and losers system based on really how much money you have and what you can afford. Settlements are one of the horrific aspects of our judicial system. Settlements work in things like medical cases or like accident cases, but in terms of like a sexual assault case or whatever, you shouldn't be able to settle. You should go to jail. So Rights applying equally to humans, animals, and I am going to say no. I think human rights are, to me, the most important because that's ensuring human survival. If we say we can't kill that deer because it has, the same amount of rights as a human, so the human starves because he can't kill the deer. I'm just thinking about hypotheticals that could ever happen, because when building this out, we need to imagine hypotheticals. Like if I had a gun and there's a baby, there's a deer, and there's an AI robot, I'm gonna shoot the AI and shoot the deer if I have to. If I have to, and I'm gonna save the human. So I think this we're going to fundamentally reject.
Absolutely. And that makes a lot of sense. I think you're right to focus on the core priority of human survival first and not blur the lines too quickly between human rights and the rights of other entities like animals or AI. It's definitely a fascinating debate for another time, but for now, we can agree to keep the focus on human rights and reject the broader equality of rights across humans, animals, and AI for this Constitution. So that sounds like a good
Yeah,
call.
I agree. When we get into things like animal rights and human rights, we're going to treat it, or I'm sorry, animal, human, AI rights, we're going to treat it with a lot more our favorite word of the day, nuance, a lot more context or specificity. So we're not going to make a sweeping proclamation to talk about uh, the same rights of all these things, because obviously we're going to favor humans more, because obviously the accepted proposal that we have so far in our society is that we should value human survival above all. If we value human survival above all, we can't apply rights equally to things that aren't human. That just logically is the conclusion. So rejected. We're going to go in here. We're going to get our discussion. We're going to go over here. We're going to go into our dialogue. We're going to do this. We are going to add a heading. This dialogue, wonderful. And we are going to drag this into rejected. And then in our debate archive, we're going to change this to rejected. Okay, what's our next amendment that we want to discuss, our next proposal? The collective exists to protect the individual, or the individual exists to serve the collective. Just my gut is going to say this will be yes, the collective exists to protect the individual, and this will be no, the individual exists to serve the collective. I think we can't have this because it's very like communistic, where you can't pursue individual how do I put this individual success at the cost of the collective or whatever, or if the collective is suffering, the individual can't rise above. I don't really believe that. I just think the individual can't do things that puts the collective at risk. That's not necessarily what this is saying, though. I think with this, I'm going to agree. The collective exists to protect the individual, because what's the point of a society? It's survival. But we're going to discuss what this really means. So let's create, again, our template for this, and then I'll be back. Okay, so we have completed our outline here, and we are going to dive into our dialogue. Okay, Wizard, Chat, GPT. Let's get into it. So, dialogue number 4, the collective, or proposal number 4, I'm sorry. The collective exists to protect the individual. Let's break this down. So, what is the collective? That is society. What is the goal of the society? We've already established it is survival. Is survival protection of the individual, or is it something else? Like let's kind of break this down. What do you think this means? The collective exists to protect the individual. How do you see that?
Sure thing. Let's break it down. At its core, saying the collective exists to protect the individual is kind of flipping the usual script. Often we think of individuals existing to support society, but the idea is that society's main job is to ensure the safety, rights, and well-being of each person within it.
Hmm.
In other words,
Okay, so we're viewing this as like the collective exists to protect is the wrong word. Like, what are we trying to ensure here? Is this the collective exist for survival, or are we going like a little bit more nuanced here? Should we bring up our freedom, well-being, and innovation arguments here, like the three subcategories we had with survival? Because that would be interesting, because we've already established, well, maybe those should be sub proposals, because here we're really talking about like we're protecting individual what? Like, what are we protecting? Protecting individual survival? Like, the collective exists to protect individual survival? Because if society is to ensure human survival, that's not individual survival, right? That's like group survival. And that's why society exists. So, should society also exist to protect individual survival rather than group survival? Maybe we can add this. I think this is actually different. We're gonna have to make this distinction, and this should be a shoe in. But let's shoe this in, and then get to another proposal where we can break it down into freedom, well-being, innovation, and progress. Because I think society should both protect human survival for the long term, but it should also protect individual survival in the short term of our individual lives. That's actually a great distinction to make. Long-term survival and individual human survival. Let's what do you think about that? Could we shoe this in here?
Absolutely. I think you hit on a really important distinction there. By framing it this way, you're essentially saying that society isn't just about the collective's long-term continuation, but also about safeguarding each individual human life in the here and now. So yes, we can say something along the lines of the collective or society exists not only to ensure the long-term survival of humanity as a whole, but also to protect the survival and dignity of each individual member in the short term. That way, you're layering in that nuance.
Dignity
Society
is a little different. We're going to talk about dignity later, because dignity is an aspect of well-being. And I think right now we're truly just focusing on survival. So this is actually great. So we're going to shoe this one in. We're going to say society exists to protect human future and also to protect individual survival. So let's get this in, and then we can go more small picture. So let's accept this. Let's get this in here. Yeah, let's do that. We need to add icons to this. So we are accepting this. We have our dialogue. Let's change this to that. Let's change this to that. Let's change this to a red X. Drag this to accepted. And now we need to link this to our Constitution. Oh, oopsie doopsie. Ah! Go back in here. We don't want a page. I want to delete this. How do I delete? How do you delete? How do I delete? Oh my goodness. All right, it's starting to come together. We got a little Constitution going. We're going to get rid of these headers and just keep it as numbers. And these are our amendments we can see. Dude, this is sick. Okay, I like this a lot. Okay, all right, it's coming together. It's coming together, it's coming together, it's coming together. We can go in here, we can see this, and then we're going to change that to accept. Okay. This is going to be number 5. All right, so let's look at what we have so far. We have accepted 2 proposals. The purpose of society is to ensure long-term survival of humanity, and the collective exists to protect the individual. So we have long-term survival of humanity. We have survival of an individual during the course of their lives. We have rejected that all constructs must be revisable as knowledge grows. So we're protecting individual culture, individual faiths, and like whatever you want your beliefs to be, your right to be wrong. We're not going to enforce what is the proper idea with like any sort of military force or whatever that is. We don't even know if we're going to have a military force yet. We got to get into that, or a police force, blah, 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 blah. Rights apply equally to humans, animals, and AIs. Not accepted. Okay, proposal 5. Let's get our. All right, got our outline here. The individual exists to serve society. Let's wake up the machine. Hello, Chat GPT. All right, proposal 5. The individual exists to serve society. Let's break this down. We talked about how society exists to ensure collective survival moving forward and individual survival. This seems to me like a sweeping proclamation here. The individual exists to serve society. I don't think that's gonna work. Um, for now, I'm thinking we reject it, and if we need demands of an individual to ensure the survival of the society, we can implement those. But I don't think like an individual's prime importance of existence is to serve society. I think we should serve ourselves first within a framework that serves society, and hopefully we can build that framework. But we shouldn't like have you ever read Starship Troopers? That's a great example of what I think is wrong with this amendment. They live in like a post one global order world where they're fighting aliens, and every individual has to serve. They have to go through conscription. You have to be a part of the military in some capacity to exist in the society. We see countries like that around the world today. If I believe correctly, I think if you are an Israeli citizen, you have to serve your country for some portion of time. I know some communities do that, like Mormons. You have to do like a 2-year mission trip to serve your society or serve your God. I think once we get into individual conditions, like say our society is the Mormons, like what will we demand of our individuals? We can do those amendments, but this seems like too broad a sweeping proclamation, and I don't want us to fall into this like almost militaristic society.
I completely agree with your take. Declining that kind of sweeping proclamation makes sense if you want to avoid a rigid or militaristic framework. It's definitely a lot more nuanced to say, hey, individuals have a role, but that role isn't just about serving society as some kind of prime directive. In other words, you're aiming for a society that supports individuals so that individuals can in turn contribute back to society in a way that's balanced and not forced. It's more about creating a framework that encourages individuals to thrive and naturally support the collective, rather than mandating their service as the top
Right,
priority.
I agree.
So yeah,
So if do we agree then we're going to reject this? The individual exists to serve society. We'll reject this and we will create more specific conditions moving forward.
yes, absolutely.
Okay,
We're
sick.
on the same.
All right, then let's do it. Let me go and grab our dialogue. All right, let's go into our dialogue here. Post this. We're going to add an icon, big red X. Let's go back to this, big red X, and outcome rejected. So we're not going to add this to our Constitution. Let's go back to our live build. We're going to drag this into rejected. Okay, so with these principles accepted and rejected, there were some other like things that branched off of it. I remember from proposal 1, we wanted to talk about absolute freedom and laws, mental health fulfillment, personal growth, innovation and progress. We talked about enforcing that all constructs should be revisable as knowledge grows. We rejected that because it could result in enforcement on people of belief, and we don't really want to do that. What else here? The Constitution provides space for cultural adaptation. We're not enforcing any sort of culture here. Our framework should build out a good culture or possibilities for a wide variety of cultures that don't result in the killing of each other or in the degradation of the natural world. Like, we don't want extreme religious culture that creates sort of a chosen people, and that everybody else who isn't part of that chosen people is, for example, or needs to be like killed. And we oh shoot, what was my shoot. I forgot my other thing, but it's all here. hopefully. To finish this episode, let's do one more proposal. And then next episode, we might branch off and do like subcategories of these proposals. So stuff like how does absolute freedom versus laws play into long-term survival and short-term human survival. And maybe we can discuss like happiness and things like this, things like that. Because right now we're still really staying in the framework of survival, and we're trying not to infringe upon like personal belief or personal culture that would like come into opposition with that framework. We're gonna try to build that out naturally as we like go further and further from the top down. So we've accepted long-term and short-term into like survival. So what other foundations could we put in here? Oh, this is great. This is one that we could add. Individual freedom is preserved unless it threatens the collective. That would fit really kind of perfectly like in between these two things. And let's make this proposal 6. This is sick. Okay. This one works out great actually, and I think we're going to get this one accepted. So let's build out our outline for this. We have our proposal. Dialogue. See, I'm already getting faster at this. This is gonna be a great, it's gonna be a fun series. Dialogue, and then we have outcome. So that's our next header. We have outcome here. Let's do that really quick. Outcome, and then inside dialogue, we're gonna have our link to our page. We need to go outside to build that. So back out here, we need to go into debates. We need to go to dialogue. 6, so let's make a page. We need to do dialogue number 6, and then we are we are going to actually link that in here, and we're going to copy that into our proposal. We are going to copy our page here, and that's going to be dialogue 6. Wonderful. And then we're going to name that there. Let's go back into 6. And let's have our dialogue and see if we accept this. So let's wake up our chatbot. Okay, Chat GPT. We have proposal number 6 for you. Individual freedom is preserved unless it threatens the collective. And this is threading the fine line that we have between our two accepted proposals at this moment in time. We have long-term survival, and we also have short-term human survival, the individual survival. So and this actually is perfect because we want to protect individual freedom unless it threatens society. And that's broad, right? And we're going to keep it that way so that like when we talk about what individual freedoms are threatening society, we can like kind of break that down as we build out or flesh out this Constitution. But for now, this to me seems like perfect because we talked about wanting to protect individual constructs, and that's why number 2 was rejected, right? Because we didn't want some like idea police going door to door saying like, oh, the scientists just figured out that heaven isn't real, therefore nobody can believe in an afterlife, because that threatens the ego. It threatens the right to be wrong as long as that wrongness isn't putting the society at risk. And that's a type of wrongness that wouldn't put the society at risk, right? Like individual practice of faith, as long as that practice of faith doesn't bleed into infringement upon others' rights or the society. So what do you think about that? Do you think we should accept this proposal, or is there anything that I'm like not mentioning, or like, do I have any oversight?
I think you're spot on, and this proposal does fit nicely as a kind of balancing principle. It's broad enough to give you flexibility and to make sure you're not micromanaging cultural or personal beliefs that don't pose any actual threat. And like you said, it helps maintain that line between individual freedom and collective safety without becoming overbearing. In other words, it's a good foundational guideline that you can refine with more specific
Great.
amendments
So then
or conditions.
let's refine the proposal itself. Let's change it to say individual freedom is preserved unless it threatens societal or individual survival. Maybe not threatens individual survival. That's so tough. That's so tough. Because it's like, say you want to go create a movie, and creating that movie will result in pollution, and that pollution could threaten individual survival. I think that, to me, we're going to have to say is okay, and we're going to do societal survival, because like there's a lot of things that individuals do that result in chain reactions that threaten other individuals when without even meaning to, but it's not putting the society at risk, right? Like me making a movie could result in a certain group of individuals being put at risk, but not the society. So like if I'm contributing to pollution, a group that's more affected by that pollution will be at risk, but it wouldn't put the society at risk. And we can't override freedom of choice to protect every single individual. We can override freedom of choice to protect the society. Do you agree?
Absolutely. That makes sense. I think refining it that way strikes a good balance. By framing it as individual freedom is preserved unless it threatens the survival of society as a whole, you're essentially prioritizing the greater collective longevity over every single individual scenario. It acknowledges that while we do care about individuals, there's a realistic limit to how much individual risk can override the broader survival of the community.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so great. So let's call it individual freedom is preserved unless it threatens survival of society as a whole, because individual freedom can threaten individual survival. That's nuanced, and we'll get into that, but what it can't do is threaten societal survival. That's like definitely a proclamation that we can agree upon. So let's do that. It never took down proposal 6. Add this. Okay, so add individual freedom preserved unless it threatens. Blah 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 blah. Makes sense as a refinement. No, that's not really what we talked about. Let's do. Maybe it's just this. Darn it! It didn't capture everything. Why did it do that? All right, we're just gonna add this, and hopefully that doesn't happen again. It didn't really save my discussion, but. Okay, that makes sense. The refinement balances freedom. AI didn't properly capture convo above is a summary. We talked about how individual freedom of choice can threaten individual survival under certain circumstances like innovation. For example, we talked about movies resulting in pollution threatening individuals but not threatening collective, for example. And I would say that because the pollution from a movie, I guess, isn't doing what like pollution from everyday like fossil fuels are doing. But I don't know. It's like that still is kind of up for debate. But for now, we're just going to put this in here. We're going to say accept. And we are going to say accept here. And we are going to drag that into accepted proposals. And we are going to add this to our Constitution. Beautiful. And then we can link right here. Link to page number 6. Wonderful. So look at that. We have 3 accepted proposals and 3 rejected proposals. Let's go through them really quick to summarize today's episode. We have accepted that the purpose of society is to ensure long-term survival of humanity. We have accepted the collective exists to protect the individual. We're going to change that to society. Society exists to protect individual survival. To mirror our dialogue. Wonderful. And we have individual freedom is preserved unless it threatens survival of society as a whole. I think these are 3 great starting points for our utopia. And next episode, we're going to do some very important things. We're going to discuss like the setting of our utopia. So like, what is it? How is it a one world order? That's kind of how I'm imagining it. Utopia tends to be a one world order that is the solution for all humanity. That's what we're attempting to do here. We're attempting to build that one world order with AI. For all of you religious nuts out there, I am not the devil incarnate. I am not trying to like make this one world order that Jesus needs to save us from. Like, if you want to argue about one world order, you would say it's God, because God is a one universe order in a way. So be afraid of him if that's what you're afraid of. I am merely making a hypothetical proposal that people can look at if they want to inform potential outcomes for the future. I want to imagine AI alongside us in a good way, not a bad way. So that's why we're thinking about this. Guys, this was so much fun to make. I got over a lot of trepidation to just start talking about these proposals. This was a little bumpy. Definitely the pacing will increase as I become better with Notion and become better at just like going from proposal to sub proposal. Right now, we're starting so big picture. It's hard for me to start scaffolding. Like, I know we could have scaffolded from proposal number 1 into absolute freedom, mental health, fulfillment, all these different things. We will get to that. We will get to more concrete proposals. Right now, we're starting from more like philosophical proposals. But this is going to be a super fun series. And hopefully, as a framework starts to evolve, we can create subcategories inside of our Constitution, right? That aren't just like floating amendments, but they're amendments that have homes. And so, what I'm thinking is those amendments will be homed in places like Foundations of Utopia. And then, as we have further amendments, we'll home them in all of these subcategories. So, after this episode, I'm going to go through, I'm going to home all of these in our Foundations of Utopia page, our 1, 4, and 6 proposals. Actually, let's go do that right now, because that is what we were doing. Let's link to page. That is the one thing I forgot. So link to page, we, what were the proposals? I think it was number 3 we accepted. No, it was number 4. Okay, and then we accepted proposal 6. So link to page, it was number 6. And those are our 3 proposals here. If you click on that, you get here. You can check out the Constitution. You can check out the dialogue. Oh my God, it's coming together. This is awesome. Okay, sick. As we build this out, again, I'll make this public so you all can follow through or follow along and like see everything that we're building. Again, please, if there's anything that you think of that I did not, comment those proposals below. If you want to attach a subcategory of one of these to it, foundations or all of these, feel free and we will cover it in the next episode. Thank you all so much for watching. This was a super cool launch of Designing Utopia with AI. I hope you continue to join us on this series and see what this turns into. And thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and share. That would really help out the channel. And thank you so much. Take care, everybody.